Reading Comprehension, Module 3. Intro. No matter which class they're taking, reading comprehension is going to be a vital skill for students to develop to help with their understanding of the subject. Philosophy in particular presents a series of unique challenges, namely 1. Having to deal with a lot of complex terms and ideas, 2. Understanding what the text is trying to say, and 3. Handling passages that are lengthy, vague, or boring. So, while the previous modules have acquainted you with the basics of philosophy at CSN and keeping students interested, this module will look at how can students find key parts of the text and apply them to the broader context. Step 1. Setup. Reading effectively requires a specific setup to ensure concentration. Typically, both the tutoring center and the library are great places to read because they are generally peaceful and free from distractions. However, students working on their own reading at home will want to recreate a similarly quiet environment if they ever hope to get through a particularly dense section of philosophy reading. All students have different times when they are most awake, so when they do their own reading, they will want to ensure they're well rested. Try to ensure they only read for short bursts at a time. People can only take in so much information at once, and taking breaks will let them check what they have understood in the bits they've read. Step 2. Finding why they struggle. Most students are well aware of the fact that they are struggling with the reading they have to do, but they don't always know why. Common problems can include 1. Complex words and terms, 2. Paying attention, 3. Language difficulties, particularly for ESL students, and 4. Understanding the main ideas. So you will want to find out at the start why they struggle with a given bit of reading, and that way you can adapt your approach. Step 3. Reading aloud. It's often very important to have students read aloud where possible to improve their reading comprehension of the text. This is important for a number of main reasons. 1. To ensure they really are reading and paying attention to the work. 2. It lets you both catch key words that they're struggling to understand. And 3. As they take a break to breathe between passages, you can check in to see if they understood what they've read. For ESL students, this can also help make sure they are reading the actual words as written and allow you to check if there has been any confusion in misunderstanding certain words and what they mean. Step 4. Highlighting. Generally, it's considerably easier to go through a given bit of reading if you can underline or highlight key ideas. This way, once the student has finished reading through the text, they can go back and find the main points once it's time to do their work. Often students highlight far too much to the point that it isn't useful or practically not at all. The key thing is to find a balance where all the sections that are essential are highlighted, but the text is still left readable and clear. Finally, look to highlight sections that might make useful quotes. This is very important if students have to cite their work and demonstrate understanding. Step 5. Annotating notes. Aside from just highlighting important sections of the text, students might want to take notes as they go along. These can either be made in the margins or alongside the text if spacing allows. Otherwise, students should grab a sheet of paper and note line or page numbers as needed so they can see which section their notes refer to. The main thing is to keep the notes brief but useful. When writing notes directly on the text, you simply won't have room, but stick to just a few words at a time and they can expand them later. Once they have a comprehensive set of notes, they can then use these to form the basis of a summary. See slide 15. Step 6. What notes to take? A lot of the time, the notes a student will want to take will depend on the assignment type and the given reading. As we saw in slide 2, the kinds of notes students will want to take also vary depending on what particular thing they are struggling with. But generally, there are a few key things they can aim to cover. 1. The main ideas and important pieces of the argument. 2. Things they don't understand or found a good explanation for. 3. Parts of a passage that refer back to a later or earlier step. 4. Any questions they had about the text or its implications. And 5. their reactions, agreement and disagreement, or personal opinion. Step 7. Looking up words. In philosophy, it's fairly inevitable that students will encounter words or phrases that they don't understand. Aside from highlighting these words to ensure they are remembered, students will want to refer to 1. A dictionary to understand what the words mean, 2. A thesaurus to look for similar words they do understand, and 3. Online sources to find explanations of key ideas or arguments. As a tutor, it's important for you to check that they understand certain words or terms that you know will be particularly problematic. But remember, quite often, students won't necessarily need to know the meaning of the word to understand the context or how it's used. Step 8. Using their own words. As part of looking up particularly complicated terms, students can rephrase key terms of passages in their own words to make them much easier to understand. So, if you ask the student to explain the point that's being said in their own words, you can help ensure that they aren't simply memorizing the passages and that they actually grasp the main ideas. Furthermore, this allows you to check if their explanations are accurate or offer alternatives as needed. In general, though, you want to guide them to the answer, rather than translate or work out the meaning of the passage for them. This is because most students will remember something better if they worked it out themselves and used all the resources at their disposal before turning to you to work it out on their behalf. Step 9. Asking questions. Try to anticipate sections they might struggle with or anything that is particularly complicated in case they need help with difficult sections. As they read through each passage, you can ask them things like 1. Do you understand what the author is saying here? 2. Are there any terms you didn't understand? Or 3. How does this fit into the overall argument? Obviously, the things you will ask about depend on the reading, assignment, and what the student is struggling with in particular. But in general, try to focus on whether they understand the text in front of them and to ask you for help with further explanation if not. Step 10. Have them ask questions. Aside from you asking questions, it's important to create an environment where they feel comfortable asking questions as well. As the student is reading, it's important to encourage them to ask about things they don't understand, and then you can explain. This often helps you tailor your approach to each specific student and their challenges, because you can tell by the questions they are asking which areas they are struggling with the most. Finally, having them ask questions boosts their engagement by getting them talking and taking an interest in what they're covering. Step 11. Encouraging an opinion. Not all assignments will require that a student argues for or even has an opinion on the text or reading. However, this is an important step to boost their understanding. 1. This ensures that they are really paying attention to the words they're reading and understanding the main ideas. 2. But this also helps them to remember the key points after they have finished reading or later on at home. It's easier for people to be engaged when they care about something. So, getting them to at least decide whether they agree or disagree with the author and why will help them more closely relate to the material. Step 12. Visual aids. As we already saw in Module 2, sometimes you need visual aids or external references to help them understand a given bit of reading. For really complicated arguments, students might want to draw them out on a separate piece of paper in order to grasp all the steps involved. Remember to check their visual diagrams or explanations for corrections as you go along, as many students are visual learners, and this helps them ensure they retain the correct image in their memory. This is often an important step to take as you ask questions, as if students ask for further explanation, outside of the words written on the paper, you can try alternative methods to help their understanding. Step 13. First and final paragraphs. Some, but not all texts, will have the main idea presented in both the opening and final paragraphs. While this won't necessarily be true for a lot of the more historical readings, modern arguments and essays will often lay out their main point in the introduction and reiterate it again in the conclusion. Even if the given reading doesn't follow this format, by rereading those passages, you can understand where the author has both come from and is trying to get to, letting you see the progression in the reading. As the tutor then, you can find out early on if the student understands the author's main objectives, early paragraphs, and what the reading actually says, last few paragraphs, by the end. Step 14. Details in each paragraph. Whether or not the main idea is in the opening paragraphs and conclusion, you'll look in the body paragraphs for the evidence. This is often a good place for students to start looking for the steps of each argument as well as to find any quotes they might need for a particular assignment. As students start accumulating all the evidence, they should start to look at how it fits together with the main ideas that they've identified. At this stage, they should also look for any gaps in the evidence, which might be caused either by their lack of understanding or because the author left something out. By the end, then, they should have a clear understanding of the progression in the text and how everything fits together. Step 15. Summarizing the text. Once the student has gone through and highlighted, annotated, and asked any questions about a text, it's often very helpful for them to do a summary at the end. Here, they should aim to write 1 to 2 paragraphs or a few bullet points, using their own words where possible, citing otherwise, and going over the main ideas and all the relevant supporting evidence. This will help them with their notes or any assignments later on. Furthermore, this again allows you, the tutor, to double-check that they have really understood their work. Remember, it is not enough for a student to have a summary from another source of the work, as this does not guarantee they have understood the reading and grasped all of the main points. Step 16. Checking missing pieces. After the student has finished reading and summarizing the text, it is important for them to go back and check anything they missed. Not only does this ensure their work is error-free, but you, the tutor, can really make sure they understand all the ideas involved. For really complicated texts, you might want to both look for other books or go online to check other interpretations of the work. Sometimes, other people might have commented on something that you both missed or can clarify something that was unclear or poorly understood. Once the student has finished this step, they should have a fairly clear idea of what the reading was about and covered all the bases. Step 17. Testing their knowledge. It's easy for students to simply read a text and explain what they just read, but they must show you they've really retained that information. Once they have read and summarized the work, you'll often want to test them to ensure their understanding of a given bit of reading. Close the book or turn it away. Ask them to explain the author's main ideas and guide them towards anything they might have missed. For bigger readings, you'll often want to test them as they go along. It's a bit much to test them on a 10 to 20 page section of a reading, so break it down as you cover each smaller section. Step 18. Conclusion. This completes Module 3. Please feel free to revisit any slides within this module and take any notes you need. There will be a quiz to assess your knowledge of the material within this training module, so see the relevant link in Canvas. After taking the quiz, remember to check your answers and retake the assessment if needed. A score of 100% is required. See the relevant Module 3 discussion thread as needed for this topic in Canvas for any further questions or comments.